think my mask of sanity is about to slip.
If you stay, something bad will happen.
Sabrina, why don't you dance a little? Christy, get down on your knees.
Can we go now?
We're not through yet. I like to dissect girls. Did you know I'm utterly insane? Do you have any witnesses or fingerprints?
Actually, yes.
Very nice.
I don't want to get bruised. You're inhuman.
I know my behavior can be erratic. I need to engage in homicidal behavior on a massive scale. Hey, Paul!
So what do?
I'm into murders and executions mostly. I have to kill a lot of people!
Okay, and welcome to the very first episode of 90s Night. This is the bonus episode, the bonus stuff of myself and Kelly getting together and doing sort of some bonus episodes of Takeover Tuesday. But you know what? We decided that we wanted to do something a little bit more just kind of loosey-goosey, a little bit more fun as far as just like an open format type of discussion about films that we love. And we figured, hey, listen, what we'd really like to do is kind of revisit some 90s films. And because, you know what, the 80s, there's a lot of stuff out there. Everyone loves the 80s, of course, but let's get into the 90s. Kells, obviously, thanks again for joining me. How you doing? And hey, tell the audience what we're doing tonight. What are we talking about?
Well, today we are hip to be square because we're going to be talking about the cult classic American Psycho, one of our mutual favorite films. I know we both love it to death, and I'm very excited to talk about this one because it has a very, very special place in my heart.
And of course, now just for the record too, these episodes are not sponsored. So they're part of the kind of fall into the Takeover Tuesday family, of course, but they are kind of bonus episodes where we're not sponsored. So we're actually doing whatever we want on these shows. Of course, I've got my custom made, I have to return some videotapes mug here. I wonder who I got this from. You gave me this a long time ago before I conned you into coming onto the show and co-hosting it with me. But thanks so much for that. I'm actually going to mix my own drink. What are you drinking over there?
Today I have a Grapefruit Radler by Waterloo Brewery because it was at the LCBO and I bought it. And that's the end of that story.
I'm drinking this. I'm making a new drink. We'll see how it is. But I'm our old friend Johnny Bootlegger. Of course, Johnny Bootlegger does not sponsor this program. But we found this in the beer store one time. We tried the grape one, never tried the peach one, and I'm actually mixing that with a Miller High Life, which is the champagne of beers, and we're gonna see what that turns into. I felt like it was like high society. I felt it was like, that's something that maybe would get served in the 80s, is what I figured. And I figured I'd mix it, hey, in my I have to return some videotapes mug that you gave me all those years ago. So let's get going. Why don't you give a quick rundown of the film, and I'll jump in afterwards as soon as I make this drink, and we'll see if it's any good.
For those who are aware, did not come out in the 1990s. However, it did come out in January 2000, set in the 80s, was produced and made in the 90s, 1999 to be specific, and is based on the best-selling novel by Bret Easton Ellis, which was published in 1991. So we feel it's going to kind of fall under the 90s umbrella, and we're counting it because it's our show, and we're going to do what we want.
Right. And we discussed this too, because we knew, listen, we wanted to review this film.
Yes.
And, we're going to hit it head on right out of the gate, because we know somebody is going to be the first comment being like, oh, yeah, it was released in January. It premiered at Sundance Film Festival. That's as close as you can get to the end of a year, the end of the decade. Yeah. And like you mentioned, the book was released in 1991. And we're going to get into some of the production notes as well about how this movie came to be, because it was sort of stuck in development hell for a little while because it was so controversial, because of the challenging nature of the content. But obviously that happened in the 90s, and production was filmed in the 90s, and whatever. as far as I'm concerned, it's a perfect reflection of movies that were made in the 90s, as the trailer we just saw. So that trailer was actually the newer trailer that Lionsgate put out in support of the new home video releases and the VOD releases and stuff. I actually checked this movie out on the 4K, which is super, super cool. Really, really great release from Lionsgate. And obviously also as well, like if you do this with the cover, he peels the mask off and there's your 4K disc,
Beautiful.
as well as the back with the axe behind it, which is very, very cool.
That's
And also an added touch, of course, matching our background. We've got the Patrick Bateman business card that's inside, which is really, really cool. So Lionsgate, congratulations. This is another fantastic release. They've been really doing some great work. And in 4K, this movie's never looked better. Kelly, you're not on the 4K bandwagon yet, but how did you check out the movie?
I checked it out from the DVD copy that I have from around 2005, 2003, something in that neighborhood. It's a very old DVD. I have a very old DVD copy that is like original release. And then I also caught it on Netflix because I was too lazy to turn on my Xbox to get my DVD player going the second time around I watched it. So it's also available on Canadian Netflix. You're welcome, everyone. Easy accessible if you are paying for Netflix, because such a pain in the ass. But that's neither here nor there. We are here to talk about American Psycho, which was released by Lionsgate, as you mentioned. It was directed by Mary Harron and also written by Genevieve. Not Genevieve, sorry. Oh, no.
Yes.
I lost her name. Guinevere.
Yeah, so it's Guinevere. We had this written down.
We're going to edit this later.
Yeah. No, I don't think we're actually going to edit anything.
We're not going to edit anything?
I don't think so. No.
Okay.
We're doing this
We're
like,
just
I mean,
doing
the idea about this
live
show was
display.
like, if we get it popular enough, we will do it with the live audience.
That's true.
So we just, we run out of time. We've got a lot of stuff going on, both of us. So, but hey, listen, if it takes off, if you share the video and if you like it and subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can only get this content on YouTube. So make sure that you do that. And then, yeah, you know what? If it takes off, we'll start doing it with a live audience and we can field your questions as we go. But
and then we'll not mess up the name Guinevere Turner, which is the other co-writer of this.
Guinevere Turner, who, co-wrote the screenplay with Mary Harron. So two women wrote the screenplay for this, and we'll get into why that's so interesting and important for the film. Potentially, maybe it was the only way that the film was going to get made, but we'll talk about that a bit later. But Guinevere Turner also played Elizabeth in the film. And so for anyone who remembers, she is the kind of Patrick Bateman's, one of his girlfriends at the end, which he ends up
brassy.
Yes, he's very brassy, and he ends up basically eating her near the end. So lots of dark humor in this movie. So of course, I don't mean to laugh at the content, but obviously it's a very, very satirical film. It's very, very dark. It's a scathing criticism on 1980s excess and that sort of stuff. And it's done in such a way that it makes it impossible not to like this movie as far as a movie fan and as far as I'm concerned. So, the film itself is, it took a long time to get made. And lots of other people were tied to this film. So it's and what people don't realize is in the 90s, it was so controversial based on its violence and depiction of violence against women. It was actually banned in almost, I think, 70% of bookstores in the US when it was released. And there was a lot of controversy about if that should have happened. If bookstores should have had the right to do that. Was it an infringement on First Amendment rights? And could people make their own decisions? So it was kind of like one of those things. And I remember being a kid, like, cause I was in high school at the time. I remember I never read the book. So guilty, but I did hear about it all the time. And when the movie came out, I remember there was a lot of hype around it that, it was the movie that you weren't supposed to see. Yeah. Like, don't go and see this movie. So where do you want to start? Should we dive into some of the production stuff for the film?
Yeah, let's dive into the production stuff. We'll talk about our personal relationships with it, and then we'll get into the nitty gritty of the actual movie itself and why we love it as much as we do.
Okay. So let's do it. So the film was released, as we mentioned before, in January 2000. It premiered at Sundance Film Festival. It was theatrically released in April 2000. Domestic box office gross was 15 million, and the international box office was 19 million for a total of 34 million. The budget at the time was about $7 million. So it was a moderate success, but it was considered a bit of a failure just because of where they anticipated the movie to be. But again, they didn't lose their shirts on it. And of course, obviously, it's gone on to become this ingrained cult classic, which is why we're doing an episode of reviewing it right now. Currently, it sits at 68% on Rotten Tomatoes, which I think is a bit criminally low. With 168 reviews, and the critical consensus on the review site is that if it falls short of the deadly satire of Bret Easton Ellis's novel, American Psycho still finds its own blend of humor and horror, thanks in part to a fittingly creepy performance by Christian Bale. And I should mention too that Christian Bale, obviously, Patrick Bateman's supposed to be 27 in the film. Christian Bale was about 25, 26 when they were shooting. So he's right on the money, but there was a lot of other people attached to this film as it kind of went through the processes, because people knew it was controversial and people knew that it was going to do well. Maybe if you had the right star attached to it. So the biggest star originally, I think Johnny Depp was they were thinking about attaching Johnny Depp to it. He had some interest in the film, but the biggest
and I think
name,
it was going to be Johnny Depp with David Cronenberg directing as well.
Yes, so David Cronenberg was attached to it, and what happened was, I guess that they had Bret Easton Ellis come in and write the screenplay, but he had just he was too close to. I think he's been quoted as saying he was too close to the project, and he was sick of it. He was sick and tired of it. So his script was like I guess Cronenberg hated his script. Apparently that script ends with there's a dance number on the top of the World Trade Center or something like that. Like it's just like bananas. Which, you know what, I'll be honest, I actually really, really want to see. But the biggest names that were attached to it were Oliver Stone. Was set to direct, and they were trying to get Leonardo DiCaprio.
Yes.
Because he was a massive star. He was really, really interested in doing it. However, he had just got off Titanic. There was a big rumor. So there was like Mary Harron got kicked off the project, or she left the project, then she came back to the project. There was some talk that they were going to do they were going to give Leo 20 million. Yes. In 1998-99, which was a ton of money.
And also more than double what the budget of the movie was, almost 3 times the budget of the film.
Right, exactly. And Mary Harron had said in an interview, she said that so they were going to do a $26 million movie, and 20 million was going to go to Leo, which she thought was just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah.
And the rumor on the street is that Gloria Steinman, who I think was I think she was Leo's agent, I can't remember, but she pulled DiCaprio into an office and said don't do this movie. Yeah. Like you're
going to alienate your audience. Yeah.
Yeah, all your audience is like teenage girls. They just got out of Titanic, and you don't want to bring them all to this dark place that is like, beyond anything that anyone's really done before. And so that's really, really interesting. And also, Mary Harron had said that she didn't like the casting anyway. She thought that Leo was too young and too
boyish,
almost boyish, too innocent looking.
Yeah.
The fact that they got Christian Bale, who obviously had been in Empire of the Sun when he was a kid, with directed by Steven Spielberg. I don't know if he had done a lot more since then. Like, I think this is the movie that broke him as an adult actor, and it's pretty fascinating to see him in this film, because he's so into the character that it's mesmerizing.
Well, he fought for the role as well. Like, I think he was working on Velvet Goldmine, which is another film that I absolutely love at the time. Right. And he was, so he really wanted to do this role, and Mary Harron really wanted him in for this project. And then, of course, that's when she left, was when the studio said, like, no, we're not taking him. He's not a big enough name. We refuse. That's not a thing we want to do. They were trying to offer that role to Ewan McGregor, Ben Affleck, Matt Damon, Edward Norton, Vince Vaughn. They all said, like, no, thanks, I'm good. And so finally they kind of conceded and said, like, all right, Christian Bale can take the role. And he fought so hard for it. He basically turned down, I think, 9 other projects or something in the time that he was waiting to see if he's going to get this role, because he just really wanted it so badly. And I'm so glad he got it, because it paid off for him in such an immense way. It, like you said, it kind of made his career. This was a big turning point for him. And I think no one else could have done this role with the same level of intensity and commitment that's really needed to kind of play Patrick Bateman correctly.
Yeah, and just the fact that there's another actor that was sort of tied to the project too was Brad Pitt, which
Yes.
I think, if you think about where he was in the 90s, like he was another guy that was really doing no wrong back then,
Mm-hmm.
and he was taking on like weird roles, right, with
Mm-hmm.
California and 12 Monkeys. So I'd be interested to see how that would have played, but again, I just don't think it would have worked. I think I almost like, not like Christian Bale's a good looking guy, but
Yeah.
I think Brad Pitt's almost like, maybe he's almost too good looking. I don't know,
Yeah.
but it would be interesting to see another director's take on it. But
Yeah.
uh,
I feel like Brad Pitt is like almost too human, if that makes sense. Like there's one of the things that Christian Bale
mhm.
kind of said that he based his character on, or he based the character of Patrick Bateman on, was there's this interview, I think on Letterman with Tom Cruise, where there's like this intense friendliness with nothing going on behind the eyes. And that's kind of what he based this interpretation of Patrick Bateman on. And I feel like there's too much friendliness behind the eyes of Brad Pitt, perhaps. I feel like maybe Christian Bale really got that satirical element of it and that kind of just hollow husk of a human element to it. But I feel like maybe Brad Pitt's a little too sweet and wholesome, and I don't know if we would have been able to get. But I agree, he would have been really interesting to see his version of it.
Yeah, and they had said that the like Mary Harron had said that a lot of the scripts and a lot of the ideas wanted to dive into Patrick Bateman's backstory, like why was he
Mm-hmm.
this character, why was he this monster, and she never thought that was a good idea, and Christian Bale agreed with her, like he
Mm-hmm.
was supposed to be like this alien that sort of like is this crazy monster that is so foreign to the rest of humanity, so which I think is a great call. Like, I mean, and I think the movie itself is so it rides that fine line of being self-aware but almost not
Mm-hmm.
really, and what they could get away with in the movie, like, of course a lot of the violence is sort of left off screen, still a violent movie, but a lot of it is sort of off screen, which I thought was sort of the right way to go as well. Very, very
Yeah.
easy to make this sort of like just like a gore fest. And I know there's a lot of people out there that would want to see that, but I just feel like the film itself works better without that.
Yeah.
And it's such a funny, like there's so many funny parts in it. And it, like, is Patrick Bateman likable? Of course not, but kind of, because
Yeah.
it's such a bizarre comical representation of, like, masculinity on Wall Street in the 1980s during this period of
Absolutely.
like cocaine and
Yeah.
excess and greed and gluttony, right? So it's
I think
super,
really
super
plays into the
interesting to see it.
90s as well, too. Like the 90s was
Mhm.
also continuing on with that in a big way, which is another reason why I feel like this fits into our 90s night, I'm going to say.
That's
Um,
right.
but I think as well, I mean, that idea of having like too much backstory and having, this is kind of really hyper violent, like Rob Zombie's American Psycho would have been a very different movie, is all I'm going to say. I feel
Mhm.
like Mary Harron's
Yeah.
American Psycho is the one that we needed. I know that Oliver Stone and Leonardo DiCaprio kind of wanted to make more of like a psychological, like Jekyll and Hyde type story to it, which I don't think really hits the mark either. As a fan of the book, I got it a bookstore in Maine when I was 15 years old and immediately fell in love with it. And so I don't even remember if I saw the movie first or if I read the book first. I don't remember what order it came in for me. It was around 2002 when I got the book. But there was definitely a very satisfied interpretation, I would say, with how this one kind of came across in the end.
So how did you find the book? Like, was it something that you were looking for? Did you know about it before you got it, or was it just something that you picked up? Because, I mean, the title's awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
a great title. I love titles with anything with the word American in it. For some reason, I just feel that it sounds cool.
Yeah. And I
I
love
don't
the
know why
titles
that
with
is. I
psycho
can't
in it.
explain
I
it.
think that sounds cool. So
Yeah, exactly. So did you get into, like, did you find yourself like seeking out that book and knowing how controversial it was, or did you just pick it up on a whim?
well, it's the bookstore that I was at. Again, I was on vacation in Maine with like my best friend and her family. And I was just sort of looking for something to read. And I had remembered hearing about American Psycho, because again, this is about 2002. Like I said, I can't remember if I don't think I had seen the movie yet, but I remember hearing about the movie and hearing how controversial it was, and how everyone was kind of like, again, it's the movie that you shouldn't see. And it's this big controversial book, and how the book is so horrifying. And of course, myself being the person that I am, I was immediately drawn to anything that was talked about in such hushed tones. I was like, I got to figure out what's going on with this book. So I found it. It didn't have anything on it saying like now a major motion picture. I know that there are some books, like I think my old copy of Fight Club has like the Fight Club poster on it, which drives me crazy because I like having the original novel. So it didn't have anything on it saying like now the major motion picture. It didn't have any sort of tie to it at all. It just is very kind of straightforward book cover. There's nothing flashy about it. But because I'd sort of heard a little bit about it, and like I said, those hushed tones of how risque and how violent and how rough and satirical it was, I picked it up because I was like, oh, this is one I want to read. This is something that I've heard about, and my mom's not here to say no. So I'm going to pick this up and I'm going to take this with me.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up reading it. I think I read it over the period of like the week that we were on vacation, or however long it was that we were on vacation. I read the whole thing, just devoured it, and was immediately just consumed by it, I think.
And what did you like? What did you like about the book the first time you read it then?
Yeah. So the first time I read the book, I think there's like a couple scenes that always really stood out to me. The main one being like the rat scene that everyone kind of always talks about. There's like a scene with like a tube and rats, and that's all I'm going to say.
Right.
Imagination can do the rest. But I think I appreciated the satire of it. Like the tone of it is very like tongue-in-cheek. There's a lot of elements to it that are very fantastical, and that like Patrick Bateman is clearly losing his mind. There's like sequences where he's talking about like a park bench chasing him through Central Park, and watching this TV show where like a giant Cheerio is being interviewed on a couch. Like he's clearly not well. He's clearly not in his right mind. And so it was really interesting kind of having it start being like this very straightforward, very materialistic descriptions that gradually gets a little bit more violent, a little bit crazier, and a little bit more unhinged. So I think that's something that always really kind of drew me in. And I really like that about Bret Easton Ellis's novels in general, is it kind of has those gradual declines, and a lot of the characters, Less Than Zero has that as well. And I think Lunar Park was another one that I enjoyed. And Chuck Palahniuk as well does a lot of that too. But that was something that kind of really tickled me, was that way that it starts off being very like almost kind of boring and dull, because it's just listing brand names of what people are wearing and where they're going, what restaurants they're going to. But then it gets a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more crazy as the book goes on, which I really, really loved that.
Yeah. And it's funny too, like you mentioned Rob Zombie. And that's funny too, because I always associate this movie of Rob Zombie, but in a slightly different way.
Yeah.
And that's like, I remember, so like I said, I hadn't read the book, but I remember the film coming out. And in much the same way, when House of a Thousand Corpses came out, it was the movie that nobody wanted to see. The studio didn't want you to see it. Your parents didn't want you, like nobody wanted you to watch this movie. And I always remember going into the theater and being like, I have this weird like anxiety going into the theater to watch this movie. Like, I don't know what I'm going to go see. It seems like it's really off-putting and unnerving. I don't know where that feeling comes. It just, sometimes I just get it. And it's usually when I'm like, it just feels like I'm not supposed to be doing it. So when I went to see the movie, so I would have been 17, no, 18. Yeah, I was 18 at the time. And the person I went with was 17. And they carded them at the desk. Like they were asking people like how old you were. And I was like, oh, I'm 18. And the person I was with was like, oh, I'm 17. And they were like, sorry, we can't sell you a ticket. And so they were like, which is the only film that I think I've ever thought of. I know you used to sneak into our movies and stuff like that, but they were asking everybody. And so we had to buy tickets for, I wish I could remember the other movie, but we bought tickets for some other flick. And then we snuck in and saw American Psycho. And it was like, I believe it was the cut version, like the edited version. So there's certain scenes, I think there's 18 minutes, 18 seconds, I think, cut from the uncut version. So the stuff that's on the on the 4K, on the Blu-ray. Even the Blu-ray you have, Kelly, I think is the uncut version, which they released on home video.
Oh, I don't have
But
Blu-ray, my darling. I have
oh,
straight
sorry,
DVD.
DVD, digital video discs. But I do still think that's the uncut version. And so they tweaked a couple things. But I remember coming out of the theater being like, I don't really know what I've watched, because I wasn't really like, I was still a kid, right? Like
Yeah.
I didn't really understand the concept of like what it was trying to say about the 80s. And again, like if you watch the original trailer of the film, it's very much set up like a 90s film. Like it's very much like with the soundtrack and all that stuff until you watch the movie, and it's just brilliantly done. But I just remember that there were very, very certain scenes in it that I was like, oh my God, like I don't know what's actually going to happen here. Even the first murder that so he meets the woman at the streetlight, and then it cuts to the next scene, and I was just like, oh my God, there's something about the soundtrack there. I mean, very much like the film is sort of like at the time I felt it was almost like a modern day like Jack the Ripper story, where you don't like this person, he's evil, he's horrible, he's a murderer, but you're somehow attracted to the story and to the
like the spectacle almost.
The spectacle, like something about it is enticing. Very much like Jack the Ripper, and very much like any other serial killer story. It's something that is so lewd and so horrific that you want to kind of like get in there and look around, or at least see what's up, right? So it's funny. The film has had such a longevity now. Obviously, it made it did have a sequel made, which was American Psycho 2, starring Mila Kunis, which is sorry, Mila, we love you, but it's a horrible movie. I think William Shatner's in that movie too, if memory serves me correctly. It's again, if there was ever a reason or an example of a movie not to be made, a sequel to a movie not to be made, it would be American Psycho 2. It's called American Psycho 2, All American Girl for some reason. Directed by Morgan J. Freeman.
Not the Morgan Freeman, but not J. Freeman.
not the regular Morgan Freeman, I guess. Or yeah, I mean, it was, yes, and William Shatner was in it. So Captain Kirk was in that movie for some reason. Maybe he needed a paycheck or something. Don't hold that against us, Captain Kirk. Hopefully we'll have you on the show at some point. Yeah, I mean, it was, the film itself is so, like, I don't know what they were trying to do. I guess I mean, in the 2000s, they were making everything into a sequel.
I know what they were trying to do. Yeah.
Yeah. And the only reason I watched it is because when I was a kid, and I first watched it and then I watched it again, I just wasn't sure what the ending was. Like I was too, like, I actually didn't, it took me a few watches to really sort of get what the ending was supposed to do. Lots of people have argued that the whole movie is in his head, that none of the murders happen. That's been debunked by Mary Harron herself. She said that was never the intention, that all of the murders do happen. It's just the fact that the characters are so interchangeable and everyone forgets everyone's name, and that's what the kind of the underlying current of the movie was. So speaking of that,
I was going to say, even that whole conversation with his lawyer doesn't even realize that he's talking to Patrick Bateman. So like, how do you really know that he had dinner with Paul Allen? Because it could have been somebody else very easily.
Yeah, and that's mentioned a couple of times too. So when I watched this for this show, I really tried to pay attention. Like, there's also lots of funny stuff I remembered, and I remember why I like. There's a couple lines. We'll get to our favorite quotes a little later in the show, but like that make me laugh out loud. But there was also some quotes that I kind of picked up on that I kind of had never picked up on before, and I don't know why that was. You just look through it. You look at a film through a different lens. Sometimes I'm like, that's like so funny to say in that exact moment. So speaking of which, let's talk about the characters, because I think that's like a great sorry, before we get there, I should mention something I forgot to say at the top of the show. The film is a nice tight 1 hour and 42 minutes, and that's got to be that something has to be said for that. It's when they made movies and scripts tight that you could fit them into that sort of that running time without stretching it out to like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
And
It's economical. Yeah.
yeah, it's very efficient. It's a very lean script. It gets a lot done. It's an hour and 40 minutes, and so something should be said for that. And I also think that if you're a studio right now, I mean, I don't know if she's retired. I'm assuming she is, but Mary Harron should be called by everyone in Hollywood to make more movies. She went on to direct Notorious Betty Page, which is also a really great movie. If you haven't checked that one out,
Also co-written by Guinevere Turner.
Yes, exactly. And they were working on that before they got this film.
Yes, that she brought her in because they were working on that film. She's
right.
like, you know what, come on.
Which is awesome. And so they thought, hey, this is a great opportunity. We can kind of put our stamp on this, make this film, and then kind of go on to make the movie that we really want to make, which is really interesting. I don't know if they did very much past that, but it's too bad because I really do feel that they're very talented. And to kind of take this sort of the source material and adapt it to the screen is pretty amazing. And we were talking about, you know, what we liked and what we didn't like about the movie. And it's a long list of likes and almost, I would say, even probably 0 dislikes. But let's talk about the characters and directing, because I think that's a really, really important aspect of the film. Of course, I had to write the names of the partners at Pierce and Pierce down. Of course, we've got Timothy Bryce, we've got Craig McDermott, Marcus Halberstram, which is where I'm taking my title from today, Lewis Carruthers, and of course Paul Allen are the main guys, in addition to Patrick Bateman, of course. And they're all interchangeable characters. They all have they all wear similar glasses, have similar haircuts. Very, very often people will confuse people with other people, or other people's fiancés or girlfriends with other people's fiancés and girlfriends. Like, it's all this kind of generic thing where everyone is sort of self-involved. Including obviously Patrick Bateman, self-involved with the murders that he's committing, but like everybody else is so self-involved with their own lives that they don't really pay attention as to what's going on. It's kind of a really brilliant satire on sort of the environment that it's based on. I just wanted to mention a couple other instances. Of course, big shout out to Willem Dafoe, one of our favorites, as Detective Don Kimball. He mentions that when he's looking for Paul Allen, he says that Stephen Hughes he thinks that Stephen Hughes has seen Paul Allen in London, which is where. So basically, Patrick Bateman kills Paul Allen, packs a bunch of stuff, and sends him to London. I guess that was easy to do in the 80s, which is awesome, right? Like, just you buy a plane ticket, like, wasn't it? Anyway. But he says, yeah, Stephen Hughes had seen Paul Allen in London. So that checks out. But it turns out that he had mistaken him for Hubert Ainsworth, who I don't think we meet those characters, but they're just so like they're just so random names. Of course, like you mentioned, Kells, like Harold Carnes, who is Patrick's lawyer, thinks that Bateman is Davis, and we never really meet Davis, so we don't really know who that is either. And what I thought was funny was that Lewis Carruthers is the only person that always recognizes Patrick.
Yeah,
like he always knows who Patrick is, no matter what's going on. Of course, like, you know, he's he does have feelings for him and stuff like that, but it's just it's interesting that, and I kind of want to roll back around to that too a little bit later on, because I think it's interesting how they did that. But yeah, I mean, and I just, some other interesting notes about the film was that Patrick's fiance, who's played by Reese, very young Reese Witherspoon, just getting her career started, but says that Patrick's father almost owns the company of Pierce and Pierce where Patrick works. So it's kind of that nepotism as well. I also just wanted to mention too that there's a sequence where Patrick is like, he obviously the business card scene is classic, like maybe one of the best scenes of all of film history, maybe is that business card scene. But all the other references to glasses and to suits and that sort of stuff. So I noticed a lot more when I was really, really kind of digging into this film, watching it. I felt like there was a lot of really, really cool, interesting things that I noticed along the way that I think really added to the film, and I'll always notice those, right? So,
well, the thing that I really love about the business card scene that I didn't notice until this recent rewatch, Everyone's business card says vice president.
Yeah.
Every
Which
single
reminded
person there is
me,
a vice president, and no one's ever working.
so I always felt that like that might have been a reference to Wall Street, like the movie
Yeah.
Wall Street, where Michael Douglas says that makes that famous speech where he's like, "You got a whole bunch of vice presidents, and they're all shuffling papers around between one another." So I always wondered that, especially since Oliver Stone was kind of like originally attached to the film. And the other thing too, just flying back to the Leo thing, is that I always like, if we, okay, so let's just say in a weird, crazy world, Leonardo DiCaprio comes on Takeover Tuesday. Leo, call us. But like, I think one of the questions I'd love to ask him is like, do you regret not making that movie?
Yeah.
Because when
he
I
made The
watched
Beach
Wolf of Wall
instead.
Street, what's that?
He made The Beach instead.
Right. So he made The Beach with Danny Boyle.
Mhm.
But I when I watched Wolf of Wall Street, I couldn't help think, like, I wonder how much this decision not to be an
Yeah.
American Psycho, and maybe it was the
This
best for
is
his
Patrick
career at the time,
Bateman, yeah.
right? Like
Yeah.
no criticism there. You never know. It wasn't like it was a massive hit. It's had legs and this longevity for
Yeah.
years and years and years. But I'm wondering if he saw that and said, you know, I gotta make Wolf of Wall Street, because for years that was like his passion project that he wanted to make with Martin Scorsese, and they actually got it made, and also a brilliant movie in much the same vein as this movie. They're very much like companion pieces. How crazy was the 80s? It was probably this crazy, if not crazier, right? So it's interesting to see how that I'd love to ask him that. I'd love to kind of like see what he would say about that. But yeah,
it seems like that's also kind of his Patrick Bateman as well. Like that's his opportunity to play that kind of character, and like to play not even just like the film as a whole, but like to play that kind of particular level of psychopath or sociopath.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to mention a few different things too, as well, that I noticed. There was there's callbacks and references to a lot of things in the film. And a couple of things that, so a couple of things that I noticed if anyone's paying attention, and a lot of people notice, so the 3 albums that he really hones in on and talks about in the music speeches, music monologues, is the album 4 by Huey Lewis and the News, No Jacket Required by Phil Collins, which I actually have back here, and also Whitney Houston's self-titled album, simply called Whitney, is back here as well. Those are the 3 albums that he really talks about throughout the film. I love those scenes. I think they're so funny, and they're just so like off-putting, that like the Huey Lewis one when he kills Paul Allen is like the funniest, because when he does the little shuffle thing
moonwalk,
in the raincoat.
It was not scripted. He just did that. They just like threw that in there and then landed.
I love, in speaking of the business card scene, when Patrick Bateman first pulls out his business cards, Bryce goes to him, "Whoa, is that a gram?" Which I never noticed before. So he just thinks that he's like pulling out cocaine like in this boardroom, which is like hilarious. But I actually never noticed that. I don't know, for some reason I was always in on the business cards, but still one of my favorite scenes in all of film. The call to Dorsia comes back. It falls back into play. I should mention too, I'm just going to stand up here, I am wearing my Dorsia t-shirt.
Very nice.
Shout out Makeup Billy. Thanks for selling me this shirt at Niagara Falls Comic-Con. Yes, and you've got your Patrick Bateman shirt on too, which is the infamous chainsaw scene.
Over my shoulder. There he is. Yeah.
So on the back wall there. And both those things, like the Dorsia call comes back later. So the first time he calls, when he's in his apartment, and the guy just laughs at him on the phone, which is like also it's very David Lynch-esque. I always felt that scene was like, if David Lynch directed a scene in this movie, it would be that scene. Yeah. But when he calls back later, when Gene says, "Oh, hey, like, maybe we can go to Dorsia," and he says, he goes, "Yeah, I'll make it. I'll call." And I love, that's like one of my favorite scenes, because I've always wanted to book like reservations like that. Like, I just think it's the funniest way to do it, to say, "No, I'm sorry, sir, we're booked up." It's like, "Great, 9:00, fantastic. I'll see you then."
He didn't give them a name. They know me.
They know me. Yeah. So they're like, which was, I think, really like, so the other thing that obviously comes back, just segueing to your t-shirt, is the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yes.
Because he's watching it while he's working out. And then obviously the chainsaw scene when he's chasing Christy down the hall, which is honestly like one of the, rewatching that, especially this time around, really great direction, really great acting. Like you're terrified for her as Christy's running down the hallway. I think it's a really visceral scene. He's fucking nuts.
Yeah.
And just unhinged. You already know this, like you're already past that point in the movie. But really, really kind of gripping scene. Like
coated in blood, wearing sneakers.
Yeah, just naked, wearing nothing but a pair of sneaks and chainsaw. Yeah. But I think what's awesome about that scene is that she actually gets away. Yeah. Like she's out of the apartment. Like there's the kind of this maze of rooms that she goes through, and then she actually gets out and she's running, but she still doesn't get away. And I think that's kind of that's what makes it such a cool scene. Usually it's someone that you can't get out of a room, you can't get out of a house, and she does.
So close. She's like right at the door, basically. And then, but I also do love that scene is immediately followed by him like drawing it on the butcher's paper that is on the table at this very fancy restaurant that he's at, like with crayons. Cause I just love the idea that they're at like this fine dining restaurant and there's like paper with crayons at the table. Yeah. It just seems like such an out of place thing to me. I kind of love that. And the opening scene as well, like when they're in the first restaurant, it's really funny to me as well because the food and the decor are so incredibly 80s and it's supposed to look very high end and classy, but at the modern eye, it just looks so damn gaudy. Like it's so tacky. Everything's all pastel and floral and just all over the place. It just does not age well. And I really love that also because it feels inescapably 80s.
Yeah. And like you said, gaudy and I have a point to make about that too. I want to come back to that as well, because I think that's going to tie into my, couple of things I wanted to say about the directing for this film. But just to finish these points up, there's 2 Trump references in the film, which obviously makes sense. The film takes place in New York City. He says, oh, is that Trump's car? And when he's in the restaurant with Paul Allen, he says, oh, is that Ivanka Trump sitting over there? Patrick says "Hasta la vista, baby" on Paul Allen's answering machine, which I guess must have been an expression in the 80s. I never remember that. I always remember it from Terminator 2, but I guess it makes sense. But I thought that was an interesting thing I noticed this time around. The funniest thing for me was when he's on the phone and Willem Dafoe comes in. So Detective Kimball comes into his office and he says obviously he's not talking to, Bateman's not talking to anyone on the phone, but he's like, I gotta let you go. T. Boone Pickens just walked in, and like they laugh. So when I was a kid, I always thought that was like a throwback to some like detective from like some 60s show or some shit like that. Right. I always thought it was T-Bone. So T-Bone Pickens. And I always laughed at that because I was like, what a funny name. Like that's not a real name. However, it is a real name, and T. Boone Pickens was actually an American business financier and a notorious corporate raider in the 1980s. So that makes sense for sure of why it would be included. But so, hey, listen, on this show, we're going to have a few drinks and we're going to be honest with you as well. I did not know who T. Boone Pickens was. Okay.
I don't know either. This is news to me.
If I'm ever rich and famous and I need to get away from the paparazzi, I'm totally putting my name in a hotel under T-Bone Pickens, just to let everyone know. So if you find this podcast and want to track me down in the future, that's a name you should write down, because then you'll find me. So, and just one last fact too. And I wanted to get, I was wondering if we should talk about the soundtrack and tie this in, but I thought it was an interesting callback as well, was that the movie ends with the 1999 David Bowie track "Something in the Air," which was a remix for the film that they did, but it also appeared on his album Hours that was released in 1999. And I always wondered if that was a throwback to Phil Collins as being like "Something in the Air Tonight." I wonder if they maybe couldn't get that song for whatever reason. They got Susudio, which is awesome. Yeah. But I wonder, like, and so I thought that was an interesting pick as the closing song of the film. So it was those were my sort of like my those are the things I kind of picked up on watching the film like more in depth this time with a closer eye.
Yeah, there's a lot of like little fun Easter eggs. The more you go back and watch it, the more you can pick up on those little things, whether it's an Easter egg or whether it's just like, again, those throwaway lines like, oh, is that a gram, that you don't notice the first time you watch it, that it just every time you're kind of picking up something new, which is, it's like a multi-layered cake of just cocaine and excess, I guess, and murder. It's a multi-layered cake of cocaine and murder.
Well, what do you want to talk about? Should we dive in? Do you want to talk about the music? Do you want to talk about quotes? What do you?
Yeah,
where
let's
do you
talk
want to
about
go? Where do you want to go from
where
here?
do I want to go from here? I want to talk a little about the music. I want to talk a little bit about like just Patrick Bateman as a character, like all the monologues that he has. I really appreciated that a bunch of them were taken directly from the novel, like line by line. They kind of took some, melded them, bits and pieces, moved them around a little bit. But I really appreciate the attention to detail because the writing is so specific and so kind of well concocted to create the sociopathic character that they have. I didn't realize, I feel so old. I didn't realize that this guy's 27 years old. I had no idea until I
Yeah.
rewatched it. And I was like, I feel ancient now because he has accomplished so much and killed so many in such a short period of time. And here I am at 35 with no murders under my belt and no millions of dollars.
Well, listen, speaking about getting old, you want to flip the background? Should we flip the background now?
Let's do it. Yeah.
To the classic background. So
Yeah.
there we go. Classic background. And we did create this banner that we'll throw up because, hey, listen, we're actually talking about this stuff now. Okay. So go.
Ooh,
Where
I
do
was
you
gonna say,
want?
I was going to say quick note of like tie-ins before I forget.
Yes.
Home Alone. Home Alone does a whole like thing with the bathroom sequence. They have a whole like take on American Psycho. They have like Home Alone #1 when Kevin is in the bathroom and he has this whole monologue of like, I use this aftershave lotion. Like he mimics Patrick Bateman's monologue in the bathroom.
I didn't know that,
which I didn't pick up on until I rewatched Home Alone recently, and I went, wait a minute, that's a very specific monologue style to have in a children's movie, Christopher Columbus. So I just wanted to kind of flag that as well, that is kind of parodied a little bit before I forget. But yeah, let's talk about the music because it's incredible.
Yeah. So the music, obviously, what I think I remember watching this and I was like, so the trailers all promoted like it was like kind of like that late 90s, early 2000s, like super late 90s, like everything was a little bit electronic. In the original trailer, there's Rammstein in it, which I was like, ooh, like, yeah, ooh. like the Patrick Bateman. We'll talk about those memes in a bit.
His reaction gift here, yeah.
Ooh, Rammstein. So, but like the, it was just kind of like, just every trailer around that time was sort of like had something that was techno in it, something that was like a little bit metal. And so it didn't really drive home the fact that the movie was in the 80s, like in the trailer, like you don't really know. Right. But when you get into the film, it's awesome. The soundtrack, it kills. Lots of really good artists on it. And obviously there was some like, Huey Lewis and the News, Phil Collins, Whitney Houston. Whitney Houston's song isn't in the movie. It's
an instrumental. It's an
instrumental cover. Because obviously her agent was like, or her manager or whomever, her team was like, maybe don't do this. Obviously it's got, Eric B. and Rakim in it. It's got Tom Tom Club at the end. And of course the Cure, New Order,
Katrina and the Waves, Robert Palmer,
just a really cool soundtrack. And the one thing about the soundtrack was that, so I have bought it because it's awesome. And obviously it does have the monologues in here as well, which is really, really neat. I love that when they do that for feature films. And there was apparently Huey Lewis and the News was fine with the movie, with the song being in the film, but not on the soundtrack. And they recalled 100,000 copies of the soundtrack because they included Hip to Be Square by Huey Lewis and the News on the soundtrack. And that wasn't approved. Some back and forth about that. There's one story that the band didn't want it on the soundtrack. Another story is that they just didn't get the rights to it. And that's why it was removed. It wasn't really that they had any sort of you know,
Any beef with
and
it?
again,
Yeah.
obviously Huey Lewis is in that famous parody with Weird Al, et cetera now. But so I pulled my CD copy. Yes, I collect CDs because I'm old, off this. And guess what? I didn't actually not know this, but Huey Lewis and the News is on this copy. So
Track 15.
track 15, Hip to Be Square, Huey Lewis and the News. So I don't know how rare that is, but hey, we're going to put this on eBay and we're going to try and finance the rest of the podcast for the rest of eternity by selling it for millions of dollars.
Yep.
There's got to be a Christian Bale. There's got to be some guy on Wall Street that loves Patrick Bateman that'll buy that, right? So,
1,000%.
but yeah, I mean, it's a great soundtrack. And again, like I love the monologues about, I mean, I wish Christian Bale would just do more of those, to be honest, like about different bands or different albums from the 80s. I think he could make some money doing that. I don't know if he's on Cameo. We should get him on Cameo to do like a review of something like, I don't know, like
just get a review
Madonna's
like
True Blue.
Yeah. Just do cameos as Patrick Bateman. I feel like people would pay like just ridiculous amounts of money for that. I would pay ridiculous amounts of money for that. That would be brilliant. But I also do love that in the novel, like there's whole chapters of album reviews. Like the Huey Lewis and the News monologue is just like a full chapter where he discusses every single album in their discography, basically. He does the same thing with Whitney Houston, with Genesis as well. Like it's a lot more in depth. So I do appreciate that it's condensed a little bit more to the film, so that it's not going on for 5 minutes while he's talking about sports and Four and every other album that they've done. But I do appreciate that they left them in because I feel like it is such an integral part to the story in a very weird roundabout way.
Yeah. And just the fact that like, it's so like for a while, like I'd be trying to figure out when they started putting, happy music to horrific scenes. And X-Files used to do it. It was a big thing. I think it started in the 90s. I could be wrong in that. Correct me if you know.
What was the first happy needle
comment down
drop?
below.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, X-Files started doing it. A lot of films have done it since then. The most one thing that Insidious comes to mind.
Tiptoe Through the Tulips. Yeah.
Tiptoe Through the Tulips. But I think it might have started in the 90s. If you know different, please comment down below in the comments below. Let us know.
Tell us.
And of course, if you got any other comments about our commentary on the film or any suggestions or any sort of interesting facts that we don't know, please leave them down below on YouTube, and we'll check them out, and we'll try to address them on maybe the next episode or next episode of Takeover Tuesday, whatever we can do. So, yeah, I mean, the music is such an aspect, such a character of the film itself.
It's like New York to Sex and the City. It's a character.
Yeah, exactly. So I thought it was the directing of the film, I think, is something that I think we should spend some time on too.
Definitely.
I had forgotten how great the opening is of this film. Mm-hmm. With the drops, obviously it looks like blood, but it's the swirls, and you were just talking about like the emptiness and the gaudiness of 80 like the 80s restaurants and that sort of stuff in the movie. It's pretty interesting how they do that. They kind of draw you into this world that seems very pretentious and very silly and bourgeoisie, and
but the
bougie
plating
and
is
like
so 80s. It's so 80s, the plating. I love it. Yeah.
And there's a lot of scenes with like I wondered, I kind of thought in my head, I for some reason I had forgotten about, I always thought that the movie had started with them going into his apartment, which it kind of does, but not the very, very start of the film. Mm-hmm. And I wondered if like the menu, if anyone's seen the menu out there, took any sort of like reference from that one scene. Maybe not, right? But it felt like that. And then you kind of like in this thing, and you're like, you almost feel like you don't belong there because it feels a little bit out of touch because it's the 80s. Everything you're like, I would never go to this fancy weird place with like, and a lot of the dishes have like, it's like a little pice of vegetable and like a flour and some
like,
sauce, and there's like nothing to eat there. I love the quote where he's just like, I'm not very hungry. I think it's who, I can't remember who says it, but like I'm not very hungry, but I'd love to have, but I want reservations. Like, which is such a great line. But the direction of the movie, there's a great scene where Patrick Bateman falls into the fog, at the kind of the start. he sort of walks around this building and he sort of disappears into the fog. It's a brilliantly shot scene. I mean, everything about the movie is shot really, really, it's clean. Like it feels, without feeling, barren or stale. Like it feels very much in keeping with his apartment,
And where
which
was
is very
it
clean.
shot, Benner?
It was shot in Toronto, the most part. So they did shoot the majority of the film in Toronto. They shot some establishing shots, obviously in New York City.
Because Mary Harron is Canadian as well, just worth noting.
That's right. Sorry, and we forgot to say that at the top of the show.
Mhm.
So Mary Harron is Canadian director. And again, Mary, if you're listening, love to have you on the show. We'd love to have you on Takeover Tuesday. We would talk to you forever. But for the most part, yeah, the movie was shot in Toronto. And it's funny you should mention that, Kells, because today, believe it, this is true. So when we recorded this today, I was just like, oh yeah, I know where these places are. Like I know where some of these places are, but I didn't know. Hey, listen, we've got a couple photos to throw up here just to prove that I was there. But like, before the show, I wanted some inspiration. So I swung by, there's me. I swung by Patrick Bateman's office in downtown Toronto. So that's basically, it's just over from Front Street, but it's the TD building essentially. So it's a big black building that's there. So that's the building in the film. So I swung by there, and also as well, like I was like looking up locations because I didn't know the exact address and I wanted to find it out. So I was looking it up, and believe it or not, the dry cleaning business that the dry cleaning scene is in the movie. I've walked by that place like, I don't know, 100 times, and I had no idea that was the same place. So I was like, screw it. I'm going to go I know where that is. It's on Church Street. And this is a photo, a still from the scene where Patrick Bateman goes in. It's right at the very start. It's like basically after his first victim. And he takes the sheets in to get, quote unquote, cranberry juice removed, or what does he say? Cranberry juice and red wine or something. It's some weird combo.
Cranberry
right?
juice. Yeah.
And when I watched the movie the other night, I was making my notes. Like the sign above it says that you feel better when your clothes look better. And I was like, wow, that's so awesome. That's there. I've actually never really noticed that in like before when I watched the film. Like I'm sure it kind of registered somehow, but I was like, oh, I love that. I love that stuff in films where they kind of do, they sort of do things with color, or they do things with words. Like a great example of this is like in Natural Born Killers, when Woody Harrelson's kind of wearing the red glasses at the start, but he's consuming a green pie, like a green like Jello pie or key lime pie or whatever it is. So it's like stop and go, and then he goes crazy and kills everyone in the diner, and like with Mallory. So that's the stuff I really kind of pay attention to when I'm really kind of looking at a film. And I find myself not doing that nowadays very much because they're not, like, you don't see that in blockbusters. You don't see that.
It's not as intentional anymore. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, I digress. So I was like, I found the place, and I just popped in, and lo and behold, here's a photo of me today, which is 23, 24 years later. And here's a picture of me with the sign. And the sign is still there. It says, you feel better when your clothes look better. And so I was like, wow. And you can't see this in the photo, but right on the right-hand side there is an actual, like a picture. I'll make sure I'll post it on our Instagram, but of American Psycho. And it's basically saying it has the screenshot of the one I just showed.
Bateman was here. Yeah.
Bateman was here. Here's where we shot it. So the lady that was working there was super, super nice. She was like, can I help you? And I was like, what are you dropping off? You're not holding anything. You picking something up? And I said, no, I'm just here. Like I'm doing a podcast and I love, we're doing it on American Psycho. I noticed that you have the sign there. And she said, yes. So I jumped. I said, listen, if you have a few minutes, can I ask you a few questions? She's like, no problem. So the place is called, you know what, I'm going to throw up their business card. See what I did there? valet cleaners, dry cleaning laundry service. It's at Church Street. They're not a sponsor of the show. Okay. They're not a sponsor of the show. This is just a business card I got them. Listen, here it is on the screen. If you need your stuff dry cleaned or anything like that, they do shoe repairs. Expert alterations. She's like, you got something altered, we'll do it. We do the best job. We've been so, and I got like a little bit of history of the, and we'll throw that back up in a second, but I got some history of the sign. Cause I was like, okay, wait a second. So did you keep the sign like from the movie or, and she's like, no, the sign's always been here. And I was like, what? And then she's like, yeah, she's like, so the sign predates the movie. And they found it and they were like, let's shoot the movie here. So as you can see, it's kind of like they sort of moved the desk, like the front area in the still here. They moved it sort of in like not where it is right now, to sort of like get the sign, I guess, in the background. But it's like basically it's in the exact same location. They've just sort of moved it over a bit and put this American Psycho poster. But it's apparently the same sign. So I said, listen, I go, how long has this place been here? So she said it's been there for 50 years, wow. If not more. It was originally owned by an Italian family that had that it was like a family run business, and it sold it to the next owners. And so and then she said they came through the production studio and they said, this is the perfect place. This is where we want to shoot. It's a really, really small place. On the outside, you just walk, and that's why the whole time I've walked by that place maybe like 100 times. Super awesome to go in there. I said to the lady in there, I said, listen, I go, she goes, we have the sign up because tourists come all over the place and they come in and they say, this is where American Psycho was shot. And they always pop in. So you're more than welcome to take a photo. She's like, come back behind the counter, like take a photo of the sign, like do whatever you want basically. And I was like, wow, thanks.
Sweet.
Yeah, and she was just an absolute awesome lady. And I said, you need to get some like patches in here or something and sell them. And she's like, what do you mean? I go, well, for all the tourists that come in, you say, look, you can take and we've got these patches for sale. You can probably get them made for like $4 or $5, sell them for like 10, 12. People will buy them. It's Toronto, right? Like I would buy one. Like if I was in New York City and went to a place and they, hey, just so you know, we've got these patches I'd be like, yeah, okay, I'll buy one. So I don't know. I'm going to put some thought into that because I feel like you could make a patch that says you feel better when your clothes look better. Because you do, right? Like, I think that's true. But I thought that was, when I watched the film, I thought that was part of the film and set design and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Very clearly it could have been, but no, it was part of the store and that's where it stays. So really, really, really awesome. Valet cleaners, throwing it up on the screen again. Dry cleaning, laundry service, expert alterations, and shoe repair. Make sure you check them out. 38 Church Street. Just go and say hello. They're the nicest people on the planet, and also they have that really cool sign. You probably get a photo with it too, just like I did. So, and tell them that you want patches. Yes, we should put some thought into that because that's a really cool idea. So we'll see.
Your clothes look better with patches. I'm just going to say it, that's
right. Patches for you. If you're listening, Linda, there you go. Let's talk. We'll see if we can help out another small business. Just, I don't know, whatever, man. Like it's a cool thing. Right. So, okay. Anyway. So, thanks for that segue, Kelly. Cause I did really want to talk about that. Cause I thought it was really, really funny. There's also, some restaurants that are featured in the film that are still there. One of them's on Front Street and one of them is at, I think it's a King Edward Hotel. I might be messing that up, but they are still there. I didn't have a chance to check those places out, but you know what? Me and you should go down and we should probably have a bourbon in whatever, one of those restaurants, and we'll take a photo and we'll let everyone know on the podcast that that's where we're at. And where to find that place. So, all right. So Kells, you wanted to talk. Okay. So just update. I have been mixing the Johnny Bootlegger, again, not a sponsor, don't sponsor us, but Johnny Bootlegger, they don't even have an Instagram, I don't think.
Really?
I literally feel like they're like a backwoods operation. But anyway, if they're watching, they want to sponsor the show, we'll make you a sponsor of the show for like not very many bottles, right? But anyway, and I'd be mixing it with my Miller High Life, the champagne of beers, and it's
How is it? What's the consensus?
Yeah, it's good. It's really good. Yeah, I like it. It's it's like a malt. It's a malt beverage, peach shot, 11.9%. Yeah. What was that? Oh yeah, that was from the.
It's from the French side. Ogre. Yeah.
Yeah, Barley. Barley is
Barley. Yeah.
yeah. So it's Syndicate City Sour Peach. Say
Ooh.
that 10 times fast. But anyway, listen, you wanted to talk about Patrick Bateman, the character, and diving into that. Go.
Let's dive into that.
Let's do it. Let's dive into it. We're at the hour mark. Thanks a lot for sticking around. This is 90s Night. It's part of our Black Fawn Distro Takeover Tuesday. It's exclusive content on YouTube. So thank you for coming back to the channel. If you could do us a favor, please subscribe to the channel. We're almost at 500 subscribers. I know that sounds small, but we'll look back on this episode and be like, remember those poor days when we weren't monetized and we only had 463 subscribers. Please subscribe, ring the bell, do whatever you need to do. And please tell people about the program. It helps us out. And we just want to talk shit about movies, man. Help us out, man. That's all we want to do. And hey, listen, if these episodes start getting hundreds, maybe thousands of views, maybe we'll do them live with a live audience online, so you guys can put in your feedback, ask your questions and your comments, and we'll make them part of the program like we do every time we do Takeover Tuesday, which is kind of a couple times a month. And of course, our next episode of Takeover Tuesday is coming up. It is the Hot Stove from Hell Terrifier edition. Make sure you check that out as well. Anyway, that's enough rambling from me. That's why my name is Yammerstram tonight. Kelly, you wanted to let's get into
Bateman. Yeah. I love that the way that they sort of introduce him in the opening scene when they're talking to all of his little group of friends there. They're kind of making all these comments, and like Patrick Bateman kind of steps in with his anti-Semitic comments. Is he actually a good guy? We don't know. Maybe he is. He seems kind of like a moral backbone. He seems like he's a good dude. But then, of course, the following sequence, he's talking to that waitress in the bar, the server in the bar, and it's clear that he is not a good guy. He's just very good at faking it. He's just an utter misogynist, terrible human being. And it's really kind of a great way to have those scenes kind of back to back like that, because it kind of leads you into thinking that maybe he's not so bad after all. But no. He is an American Psycho after all. I love the line where he's doing the whole bathroom sequence and doing his whole routine. And there's the whole fantastic monologue that ends with, "I simply am not there," which just is such a great little way to end that whole segment. I love that the whole thing with Patrick Bateman as a character, the whole thing with him, even leading into like his ending monologue where he kind of ends the film talking about, what's the line? No new knowledge can be extracted from my telling. This confession has meant nothing. Like he's just he's so flat and he's so nothing, but he's terrifying at the same time. And he has no moral code, but at the same time, he cares too much about everything. He just wants to fit in, but that's because he's trying to have this mask of sanity that is slipping. I think he's such a fascinating character in terms of the psychology of him. But yeah, I'm kind of curious with your thoughts as well. I also kind of like that the book ends with a shot of a sign that says "This is not an exit," which they kind of don't do that in the movie, but I'm okay with it because I like that they ended the monologue that they've ended on. But what are your thoughts?
It's on the door behind him, though.
It's on the door behind him? Oh, perfect. Nailed it.
So yeah, in the scene where at the very end, when they're kind of zooming in on him, like he gets back from talking to the lawyer and sits down, he's all sweaty and everyone's like, "What's your problem, Bateman?" and stuff like that. That "This is not an exit" is on the door just over his right shoulder.
Oh, perfect. Yeah. I've always been so fascinated by his face and how dead it is that I just miss the sign every single time, apparently.
You know why you missed that? Because you have DVD. That's why. If you had Blu-ray or 4K, it'd be crystal clear. Crystal.
It wouldn't just be blurry and small and
so
invisible to the naked eye.
Guys, we're gonna start a crowdfund. And it's gonna be to get Kells McNell's like a 4K TV and a 4K player, and I'm gonna blow her mind with like movies like American Psycho in 4K. I love the character. It's funny that you should mention that too, because I think that one of the awesomest things about the film is that how at the start, like I laugh at this line because I've seen the movie a few times. I have probably seen the movie maybe like 8 times, right?
Yeah.
And the when he says, "Hey," I can't remember who he says it to, but he's like, "Cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks," and it's like I always laugh at that line now because you know what a piece of shit he is, right? Like you
Yeah.
know that he's a mass. So, and what you said about how empty and dead he is, but
Mhm.
that's a reflection as well of the society that he's in, that he's a part of. So
Absolutely.
when you were saying, "Oh, he just says all these things that are like kind of talking points,"
Yep.
that comes up again at dinner when he says,
We
"We
have
got to
to
be worrying
encourage
about
a
other things
return.
like how to solve." He just kind of lists like
Yeah.
all the stuff that would be in a newspaper that day.
Yeah.
Like
And
we
we
got
have
to
to
end
encourage
world
a return to
hunger,
traditional moral values is what he says.
traditional moral values.
Yeah.
We have to end world hunger. We have to stop like the arms race. Like he just
Yeah.
lists all these things, and everyone goes, "Oh yeah, interesting." And I couldn't help think, you know what? It's funny because I do feel like the film in general, it takes on almost like a new identity, like a new flesh every decade you watch it in.
Definitely.
When you watch the special features on the blue, there's not a lot of new stuff. There's a new commentary by Mary Harron, which I didn't get to, but I definitely will. But most of the special features are stuff that being ported over from the DVD, so they're probably the same as on yours. And they're kind of talking about like in the mid 2000s, like it seems around 2004, 2005. So they're obviously talking about republicanism, George Bush and the White House, and that. I think if you watch this movie in, let's say, 2017, 2018, it would have a different feeling. I just watched it in 2023. It's got a different vibe to it as well. The movie's the same. The movie hasn't changed. It's just the things about, like what you said, the talking points, like of just like, oh, we got to do this and this and this and this and this. And it's like, are you really
Like,
doing that stuff? Or is it just stuff that you've read, that you've been not told to say, but like, I don't
is
know.
good to
Yeah.
say. It's a good thing for you to have, like, to share these moral values, even though, like, there's a sociopathic indifference and narcissism that's kind of permeated all through that community, modern community, as well as was in the 80s. That whole Wall Street life. We talked about Wall Street, the movie, earlier. It kind of continues on through there as well. There's that there's that vague sort of pretense of caring and vague pretense of like having those strong moral code. We're like, oh yes, I'm an upstanding citizen and I feel like these are good things that we should be doing, but they don't care about that. They just want to do cocaine and hookers and have fun.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because we always talk about, and again, we're not getting political on this show, but like, but obviously the 80s were, there's references to Reagan in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
and obviously I think if you watched when the movie was made, 1999, in 2000, then you watch the special features that were kind of made in the 2000s. There's another, W. Bush was in the White House, was another Republican president. So there's obviously some definitely like ties to that. However, when I watched it now, there isn't a Republican in the White House, and not that we're American. So like, whatever. I just watched it and I felt it kind of had this connection to like the vapidness and emptiness that I think is sort of like we sometimes see on social media.
Definitely.
And I couldn't help but think like, yeah, like there's something that there's a connection. I don't know what it is, but it's like a feeling and a connection of like, that's in like it does feel like, hey, this is what we got to do. And everybody else is fucked up at the table in that dinner scene. And at Espace, which is the name of the restaurant. It's just, yeah, I just thought it was very interesting how I think if we watch it 10 years from now, I think it'll have an even different, like a different kind of vibe to it. So I think capturing that, whatever Christian Bale and Mary Harron and co captured in this film is, and again, with Bret Easton Ellis as well, the source material, like everything is like pulling on these things that are not necessarily tied to one decade.
Yeah.
Like they were the craziest, I think, in the 80s.
Timeless, though.
But they're these timeless things that kind of they're like undercurrents in our society that tie to like popularity. Like, what does Patrick Bateman say? He goes, I just want to fit in.
Exactly.
Like he says that, like he says that, and he says similar things throughout the film.
He's
so
like
yeah,
vapid virtue signaling. Yeah.
Right. And I had, so I noticed, so yes, I have some thoughts on Patrick Bateman. So here they are. So Bateman doesn't like to be touched. Anyone who tries to touch him, he like hits them, or he smacks them, or he like pulls away. So that includes Lewis. That includes Craig McDermott, who's played by Josh Lucas. And we should talk about the cast at some point too. One of the prostitutes that he hires tries to touch him, and he says, don't. I think it's that scene where he says, "Don't touch the watch."
Yeah.
So,
which was going to be Rolex, but then Rolex is like, we don't want our name in there, just change it to watch.
Yeah, and his fiance, same thing. So, what I wondered too is like, there are some deleted scenes in this film that are like really like the hardest thing to do is edit yourself. I agree with why they cut them and stuff. They don't really add anything to the movie, and they almost take you out of the vibe that they were having. So really, really great calls to cut the deleted scenes. They're worth watching if you have one of the home video releases. But I just couldn't help but think, like, is Patrick Bateman potentially like a closeted homosexual in this film? Is that part of the vibe? One of the reasons I thought this when I was doing my research was that Mary Harron said that she was criticized for making Bateman homophobic in the movie, and which she thought was weird because there was no criticism about him being a psychotic murderer, which is perfect too. There's there are some references to like the AIDS epidemic, obviously, and being gay and having AIDS, which was like was misinformation that was spread around in the 1980s. So capturing that sort of asshole sort of like misinformed, what would you say? I'm missing the word right now, but just the identity that the people that they're portraying in this movie, who are not nice people, they're horrible, awful people. And obviously horrible men that are working on Wall Street with too much money and too much access and no limits and no rules. And as Patrick Bateman says himself, no barriers by the end. I wonder if that's it. There's a scene with Lewis where Lewis is like, "Oh, I felt like this." Like he thought that Patrick was coming to make out with him in the men's bathroom. It's one of my favorite scenes in the world. One, because he washes his hands with his gloves on, which I think is like, it's just a funny, like, this is what people don't understand about this film. It's like, if you've only watched it once, you might not pick up on stuff like that, but it's like, it's so funny because he's so terrified of not being able to fit in, like not being able to fit in as a misogynistic, homophobic male in this environment, that he's terrified. And that's the first time he says, I have to return some videotapes, which are either the ones that he's watching are like hardcore pornography or horror movies. Right. So, so I gave that some thought. I think that when the film was made, I don't necessarily think that this line of thinking was maybe prevalent in society at that time. But I do feel like since then, I think 20 years down the road, there is a lot of examples of people being homophobic and then potentially being gay themselves and being in this kind of a state of denial. I'm not saying that's usual or typical or anything like that. But I'm just saying, I think there's examples of that in society. I don't know if that was kind of what they were going for, but when I watched it now, I was like, I wonder, is that sort of like, is that kind of what they were maybe alluding to or something like that? I couldn't tell. And I'm not suggesting that was a bad thing or a bad way to go. I just think that like, it was just an interesting thing that I noticed of how he's like, maybe doesn't understand because he's a complete sociopath, that things are happening and he doesn't know how to control everything. I don't know. It was just an interesting thing I noticed. So, but he does, the other thing too, is that he does let Jean go and saves her essentially from him saying, I might do something bad. And that's another scene where I was like, she thinks that she's there for something romantic and he sees her there as something to kill, and that he doesn't want to do that he does treat her innocence with some demeanor of of I don't know.
He I think he also just kind of rationalizes that like that would be a very difficult murder to kind of, because it's his
Yeah,
assistant. That's the way I
he
thought about it
can't
too. It's
do
like
it.
it's
Yeah.
too complicated. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of what I was thinking about it as well. It's like it's partially that he wants to kind of preserve her innocence a little bit, partially that like she's not terrible. And in the book, I think he actually kind of develops more of a not a close relationship with her, obviously, because he doesn't really have a close relationship with anybody, but he has more of a relationship with her than he anticipated having, I guess. One of the things that I really like about him as a character, and this sounds like a sociopathic thing for me to say as well, but one of the things I really like about him as a character is that he has like just such an utter indifference towards everybody and everything, it seems. And he's just, again, like it's just dead
Mm-hmm.
eyes. He's just not, that he simply is not there. He wants to fit in so that he's avoids suspicion, also because that's just what you do, especially in that type of society and the narcissistic high class society where it's just, again, as you said, the word of the day is excess, I think. But that community that he's part of, that lifestyle that he's part of is just being about fitting in. But he just doesn't really care. There's nothing else that he really like. I think, what's the line? Uh, My punishment, or there are no more barriers to cross. All I have in common with the uncontrollable and the insane, the vicious and the evil, all the mayhem I've caused and my utter indifference toward it have now surpassed. My pain is constant and sharp, and I do not hope for a better world for anyone. In fact, I want my pain to be inflicted on others. I want no one to escape. But even after admitting this, there is no catharsis. My punishment continues to elude me, and I gain no deeper knowledge of myself. It's like, it's such a, I love that ending monologue. It's so like, it's such a punch. I think it's
Yeah, this
fantastic.
confession has meant nothing. And
Yeah, exactly.
yeah, and going back to like I do feel like those again, I'm not trying to suggest anything or read into anything. I just think that
Yeah.
he like going back to how Bale was performing,
Yeah,
is that
for
treating
sure.
the character as like an alien that doesn't understand anything that's
Definitely.
around him. So the other interesting thing too is that going back to him letting Jean go, he also lets the kitten go too.
Yeah.
And so yes, he's losing his mind at the end where
Feed me a stray cat. Yeah.
yeah, he said, "Feed me a stray cat." He tries to put the kitten's paw into the ATM. The old lady says, "What are you doing?" He shoots the old lady, but lets the cat go.
Mhm.
And previously, when he meets the homeless guy on the street, who he stabs to death, he also kills the dog, like
Mhm.
in that scene. So it's a weird, like, again, I think it's just like it's a play on him looking at the world around him and reflecting that. And I think that's kind of like I probably didn't say that as well before, but just kind of saying, so this is bad, so therefore I don't want to be that.
Yeah,
This is rewarded with money and power and status, so I want that. I'm going to act that way.
for sure.
And it's a like he is a satirical reflection of that emptiness and
Mhm.
that horrible world that he's kind of a part of. I think it's a pretty, again, it's like it's so hard to balance that with a level of dark humor where you are laughing and then horrified the next scene. Like, for
Yeah.
instance, like, people laugh in this movie. I laugh in this movie. Don't get me wrong,
Yeah.
for sure. And I laugh, like, I come from a school of thought that, like, when something is preposterous, it's funny. So
Yeah.
when something's so over the top, like, it's funny because nobody would actually be like that, or maybe they are. And if they are, equally, like, it can be equally hurtful to people, but also, like, who would want to be that? Like, who would want
Yeah.
to be that vile and despicable and horrible? I think you watch shows like that all the time, like, Succession, or The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, that sort of stuff, where it's like, these are horrible people that are, like, morally um, decaying
Corrupt.
inside
Yeah.
or corrupted. And you don't have, and what are they though? Are they just inherently bad or evil, or are they a reflection of, like, is it nurtured by the horrible, corrupt, decaying world around them? And I think
Nature or
that Patrick
nurture.
Bateman is probably, like, one of the best examples in film of doing that in such a way that it creates this sense of, you would never want to be like this person, but perhaps, and it's to it's to 11, it's to, whatever. This is an extreme example.
Mm-hmm.
However, is it somewhat reflective of you looking around your own environment and saying, what is decaying around me?
Yeah.
And is it affecting me? Am I a reflection of that? So very, very interesting. I felt like it's kind of one of those movies where every time I watch it, I pick up on something new.
Yeah. I love the scene when he's doing the whole, like, when he's running around through the office buildings right before he does his big confession and he's having that shootout with the cops. Again, moments that are not funny, but are really just bizarrely funny. Is when he shoots the car explodes and he looks at the gun like, doesn't understand why it blew up a car, because why did it blow up the car? He shot the car once and it just blows up. And it's little moments like that. And again, when he's running around through the building and he shoots the security guard, he runs back through the door and shoots the janitor, and like, it's those moments of absurdity. Yeah.
So the reason, so I've thought about that too.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people think that the movie is all in his head because of that scene of he shoots the cop car and there's this massive explosion. And then he looks at the gun. And obviously that tied with his confession and the chat that he has with the lawyer at the restaurant the next day.
Right.
And of course, the closing line, this confession has meant nothing. None of this happened. The other thing, so I really want to touch on this because I think this ties into a lot of the stuff we've been saying and discussing on the show, is that so at the time he goes into a building. Where am I going to start this? This is where I kind of like put a lot of stuff together. He goes into the building and he looks at the guard and he shoots the guard in the head. It's because he's in the wrong building. Yeah. It's because he's going to his work and he's gone into the wrong building and everything looks the same. And that's
the guy even says like, "Oh, hello, Mr. Smith." Like he doesn't even acknowledge it. Yeah.
Right. So which is another tie into the fact that like everyone thinks that everyone else is somebody else. Like everyone looks the same. Nobody has an actual identity. No one has a sense of self in the film. Everyone is just a cookie cutter or a copy of somebody else that came before them or that they work with or whatever. So again, nobody realizing where Paul Allen is, even though he is like probably decomposing in a bathtub in Hell's Kitchen, which is part of the confession, which you assume is true because we know the confession is true. But so was that also as well that everything kind of looks the same. For instance, like all the murders take place in Paul Allen's apartment too. So, and this is, this is a brilliant scene that I had never really clued in on. And I always had gone back to it, looking at it the wrong way. So I always felt like, so if you watch the movie intently, like if you really, really watch the film, he doesn't commit any of the murders in his own apartment. Other than I think, I can't remember if the two prostitutes are in his apartment. I think they are. But the
first time, but then he comes back and actually kills them in Paul Allen's apartment. This is nicer than your last place. And he's like, no, it's not.
Because he says, this is my other apartment or my new apartment or something.
Yeah.
So, and all the dead bodies are in there. So when Christy runs around the apartment trying to get out, there's dead bodies in the closet. All the dead bodies are in Paul Allen's apartment. So he's been using Paul Allen's apartment as his kind of his kill room. So when like he goes back, so he makes the confession on the phone at his office. He goes back home, gets up in the morning, he leaves the apartment and he goes back to Paul Allen's apartment. And so there's no distinguishing about, like how much time has passed. You assume it's the next day. So he goes into, Paul Allen's apartment, checks the closet, and the bodies that are there before are gone. And and the real estate agent comes in, and this is a real credit to Mary Harron too, for this is expert directing. Is that she comes over and says, "Are you my 2 o'clock?" And he says, "No." And he goes, and then she's like, "Oh, did you get my did you see the ad in the Times?" He's like, "Oh, yes, that's right. I saw the ad in the Times." She goes, "There was no ad in the Times." And as she says that, she takes a step backwards, and so she realizes that he's the killer. She realizes that he's back there to see what's happening. as she says that, she goes, I really do feel you should go. And she steps back into the shadows, meaning that she's morally corrupt as well. And that she knows what's happened here, but doesn't care. She just wants to sell the condo. She just wants to sell the apartment in New York City. And I was like, holy shit, that's awesome. And if you have a chance to go and watch that scene in the movie, it's so well done. And again, it's like, but you have to like look at it. I'm not saying that people watch, like, I'm not saying I watch movies better than people. That's going to come across like I said that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying, like, if you're trying to kind of pick up on stuff and how stuff's put together in a film, I was like, oh my God, I've never noticed that before. And it's so good because she's very unassuming. Again, kind of a David Lynchian moment. That moment and the one where he's calling Dorcia for the first time and the guy's laughing on the phone hysterically. Very David Lynchian, I like, which is awesome, but also Mary Harron with her own flair on the film. That's a scene for me that, like, I think I will always remember now. Because of it's so close to the confession. Like, everyone remembers the confession scene. Yeah. But and the scene when he's talking to the lawyer, and this is the scene that's kind of like in between those. I think it's really it's really, really great.
It's that's a scene that is like it's from the book as well, but I love the like you mentioned, the element of the lighting to it as well, because I didn't pick up on that with the lighting when watching it. But that's a good point. Is like, if you want to rewatch a movie, like, also pay attention to the lighting with certain characters, because it does communicate a lot in a lot of films. I think that's a really good point of sort of, again, guiding towards, like, was it real, was it not, is that idea that, like, it's not just him that's part of this big network of terrible, awful people that are just trying to make a buck. Maybe there are other people that are saying, we just really like this apartment, we really like this condo, let's just try and these are just full of hookers, no one knows them, just under the rug, sell it for a lot more money.
Fresh coat of paint,
exactly. And I
put
think
the sign up on the lawn.
Yeah, it's easy peasy, no problem. No one will ever go looking for them. I think that there's lots of little hints here and there that kind of communicate towards, like, it's not all in his head, which I do really appreciate, because it's kind of like when you watch High Tension, spoilers, is to a certain extent, it's like, okay, but there's so much else that goes on that points to there being a second person there, that, like, it doesn't really make sense if this doesn't actually exist. You know what I mean? Like, there's so much in that movie that kind of points at, like, these dominoes would not fall this way if this was not the way that the dominoes were falling.
Yeah. And again, sorry, go ahead.
With nobody knowing who anybody is. Every scene, someone's calling someone by a different name, because nobody knows each other except for Louis Carruthers, who always knows Patrick Bateman and is very close friends because they're always doing coke together in the bathroom.
Yeah. And yeah, totally. The fact that, like, again, another kind of like a mirror of the society that he's in.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
Is that everyone's up in for themselves. Everyone's trying to get to the top. Everyone's trying to, like, lie, cheat, and steal anything they can get. I felt like the film, it's like I said, like, the film itself, I think we have a lot of there's maybe one of those currents is commercialism, right? And
Absolutely.
that somehow kind of went away in the 90s a little bit, and then kind of came roaring back in maybe the 2000s or the 2010s. But it's an interesting, I can't wait to watch this movie in 10 years. I really can't.
Yeah.
Just because of how it might resonate.
We
should talk about the cast as well, which we kind of left out. This is our first show, everyone. Okay. So just, like, cut us some slack.
We just talked a little bit. We touched on it.
We touched on it,
cast,
but as, I mean, again, obviously the Redux trailer from Lionsgate, it obviously calls attention to a lot of these actors. Of course, Christian Bale, Willem Dafoe. Willem Dafoe apparently never ages. The guy always looks awesome, but also a little bit creepy as well. But
yeah,
mostly awesome. I wish he was my uncle. But obviously, awesome. Reese Witherspoon in the film. Chloe Sevigny, who is apparently that was one of Oliver Stone's choices for casting that they kept. So they did keep her in the film, which is awesome. She's great. She's had a long career in a lot of great roles. Obviously, so Josh Lucas. There's another. Oh, and I just had this written
There's
down.
Matt
Hold on.
Ross and
Matt
Justin
Ro-
Theroux.
Yeah, Matt Ross and Justin Theroux, who are, have gone on, have the character actors. They've been in lots of stuff. And again, just an interesting fact as well. The Patrick's lawyer at the end, who's Harold Carnes, is played by Stephen Bogart, who is actually a Canadian actor and who was actually in Black Fawn Films film Antisocial 2. So, which I never actually knew until I did my research on this film. Again, great character actor. He was in Umbrella Academy and a lot of other stuff as well. Just a really kind of cool tie into that, just to see. I don't know. I love shit like that. So, I mean, it's just really, really cool to see Canadian actors still kind of, acting all these years and then still doing sort of all these variety of productions and stuff. And if you want to check out Antisocial 2 and Stephen Bogart's production, you can do that on Tubi and YouTube. So if you want to give it, I highly recommend watching Antisocial 2 over American Psycho 2. Sorry, I know that's shameless self-promotion, I know, but trust me, you'll thank me later. Let's talk about we got to wrap this up, man.
I was going to say,
before we got on the air, we were like, you know what, we're going to have a couple of drinks. We're going to talk about this for 3 hours. we promised it would only be an hour and a half, but we've I don't know if we've blown by that, but we're getting close. So I do want to talk about a couple things, but let's get favorite quotes out of the way, because I feel like you want to go one for one favorite quotes. You got favorite quotes written down? What do you have prepared?
I think one of my favorites is obviously, I have to return some videotapes. Oh, my glass is empty now. You can't really read it as well anymore. But I have to return some videotapes is one of the all-time favorite quotes of mine. Gotta love it. I love the "because I want to fit in" line. That always does a lot for me. And the "I simply am not there" line, which I know I mentioned earlier as well. Those are kind of some of my favorites. But then there's also it's an infinitely quotable movie. There's lots of little one-liners here and there that are just hilarious for different reasons. But what are yours? I know you wrote down a bunch.
Okay, so I wrote down a bunch because I was and I stopped because I was well, I might as well just play the whole fucking movie on the podcast, because so one of my favorite quotes is so one of the monologues where Patrick Bateman says, "I'm on the verge of tears by the time we arrive at Espas, since I'm positive we won't get a decent table, but we do, and relief washes over me in an awesome wave." I love that quote. I love saying relief washes over me in an awesome wave. I do say that quite a bit sometimes. So but I did pick up on others that are similar. After he kills Paul Allen, he goes to his apartment. He says, "There's a moment of sheer panic when I realize that Paul's apartment overlooks the park and is obviously more expensive than mine." And then he says, "And I calm myself and move myself to the bedroom." It's just it's so funny. So a couple of the other quotes we've already talked about, but my all-time favorite quote in this movie is, I think, the Espas quote, but a very, very, very close second is when he's talking to Kimball, who's played by Willem Dafoe, and he says, "Listen, you'll have to excuse me. I have a lunch meeting with Cliff Huxtable in the Four Seasons in 20 minutes." I just think that's the funniest. I've always wanted to use that as an excuse, with somebody to see, but I just feel the reference is too weird now. So, but I remember when I saw the movie, everyone knew who Cliff Huxtable was, right? Which is obviously Bill Cosby on the Cosby Show's character's name, but had a different. Obviously, I had the thing that we're going. Here's an excuse that you're using with one of the most popular, America's Dad on television. It'd be kind of saying I have a lunch meeting with Jerry Seinfeld or something like that. So so really funny quote. I love that quote. The other is an exchange between Bateman and Van Patten. Where he says, "Do you know what Ed Gein said?" And Van Patten says, "Ed Gein, maitre d' at Canal Bar?" And Bateman responds, "No, serial killer, Wisconsin, 50s. I just love how it's such a dynamic, a weird, funny dynamic to like confuse like a serial killer from the
For a
1950s Wisconsin with
maybe.
the maitre d at like some uppity fucking New York bar.
Yeah.
Hilarious. Anyway, and then my last one that I had was this is one that I noticed when I was watching. I never noticed it before, and was when Kimball's interviewing. He goes for dinner with Patrick Bateman to get like some more information about Paul Allen's disappearance, and he said and this is Willem Dafoe talking. He goes, maybe he did go to London, sightseeing, drinking, whatever. I was like, so some guy just packs his bags and like goes. He's like, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go drinking in London for like a week. And
Whatever.
but that's like, okay, that's fine. Shit, maybe I would have done that for sure. But like, but it's just funny that like the New York detective, like that's kind of what he draws it to. Like, I don't know. I just thought it's a throwaway line. Willem Dafoe is brilliant in this movie. He's not in it very much, but he's awesome in every scene he's in. He does steal a lot of scenes. There's some talk that when he was doing the interview scene with Patrick Bateman at his office, that Mary Harron directed him to act like
3
you're not
different scenes.
suspicious. Yeah, what was it? It's suspicious,
It's 3
not
different
suspicious.
takes. Yeah, so one take he was suspicious, one take he was
Mhm.
not suspicious, and the third take is he hadn't really made up his mind yet.
Right. And
Mhm.
and so and then editing those together makes it seem like, is Patrick Bateman, is he like there's a great exchange where he goes, I hope I'm not being cross-examined. And he goes, no, do you feel that way? Not really. It's like, it's such a like you don't really know, like the dialogue is such a killer part of this movie.
Yeah.
And props to obviously
Guinevere Turner and Mary
Guinevere
Harron.
Turner
Yeah.
and Mary Harron for writing this. A question I had for you was that like the film, so when the film was shot in Toronto, lots of controversy.
Yes.
I don't know if this has ever been proven. I think it has been, but like that, obviously it was in the late 90s that we were filming in Toronto. It was reported that Paul Bernardo, who, Paul Bernardo was horrible, horrible person, had a copy of Bret Easton Ellis's American Psycho.
Mhm.
And so it was met with a lot of, obviously the book was very, very controversial in the States, and let alone going to Toronto and shooting it. It was met with a lot of protesters. Mary Harron really did appreciate what those protesters were trying to say.
Yeah.
They did relocate a couple scenes, which is why some of the apartment scenes do look like they're on a soundstage, because they were. Some of them were supposed to be shot in actual buildings, but the buildings didn't want the negative publicity going around with the connection with that. Looking back, it's easy to see why and understand why and appreciate where that's coming from, especially when I was a teenager. Like I grew up, I remember reading reports on the Paul Bernardo stuff. It's horrific shit.
Yeah.
And really, really, really horrible stuff. I don't think it was done on purpose. I think obviously they shot in Toronto because Toronto doubles up for New York. It's half the price, if not less, especially in the late 90s. I get it. But just the overall arching sort of thought about this movie when people were going to see it was that it was very misogynistic. And the counter argument to that, which, Mary Harron has said and Guinevere Turner have said in interviews, is that they felt it was a predominantly feminist piece of cinema that was illustrating like the evils of men and the horrendousness of this. Like, it's so horrendous. Why would you ever want to be like this kind of idea? I'm sure I'm not phrasing that right, but throwing it to you, like, what's your perception of that as far as like, listening to the criticism of the movie and listening to that stuff? Is it something that like I don't know, like
What's my take?
Yeah,
so
I'm just curious because I mean, no one wants to hear like the slightly overweight white guy talk about everything, right? So like, yeah.
I think that with the book, that part of what makes it so controversial is that it's satire. Like, it's not meant to be taken seriously. It's not meant to be taken as like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. I love this guy. I want to do everything he's doing right here. It's very satirical. And a lot of the lines that you're kind of flagging as favorite lines from the movie is dialogue, like part of the monologues taken directly from the book. Like, that's the absurdity of this character and how like conceited and ridiculous and narcissistic he is. I think that one of the other things too is that I know I'd also heard about the Paul Bernardo thing, but I'd also heard that I know he wrote a book when he was in prison, and it's like borderline illiterate from what I understand. Like there's some thought that maybe the book was actually Carla Homolka's, because everyone's like, I don't know if he actually would have ever read that book. So it's kind of curious, and I've heard both sides of that story, and I don't really know which side is the more accurate side. Either way, they both had the book in some way, shape, or form. Not great. But I think they also, if that is the case, missed the point of the book. That again, it is very satirical. It is not seeing this guy in a good light. And I think that this film really does a very good job of highlighting that and not making him a likable character. He's an entertaining character. He's a very hysterical character, but he's not really a likable character. He's not someone that you should identify with positively. So I think in that regard, I do agree that they did kind of put a good feminist spin on it and making it be very much about the evils of men with all of his friends as well. Like, it's not just Patrick Bateman. All of his friends are assholes too. They're all terrible dudes. They're awful people. Every single man in this film, basically, except for possibly Willem Dafoe, Willem Dafoe's character is like, they're all shitty dudes. Like every single one of them is a shitty dude. And all the women in the film are very just subject to that victimization of how terrible these shitty dudes are. I really like Guinevere Turner's character in the movie because I feel like, again, she's very brassy and she's very kind of bold.
And I didn't know that until like the other day. Like I always thought she was great in the movie. I didn't know who the actress was. I just thought, oh, like you said, like she's
great.
She's very, very different than the other women portrayed in the film. Which makes her interesting as a character. But I didn't know that was the co-writer of the script.
Yeah.
Which is on me, but
still, I didn't know either until not too long ago, actually, when I was doing research on it a while back. I was kind of just reading up on it because I was curious and discovered that it was going to be Guinevere Turner. So I like that I have that character in there as well. But I think that they did a great job with what they wanted to set out with it. I think it's not meant to be taken as a look at this man, isn't he neat? Shouldn't we do all the things he does type of character? Like, it's very clear that he's not that type of guy. So yeah, I can understand the criticism. I can understand the concern, but I also think that having that concern is not understanding the intent and the context behind the film and the book, I think.
Yeah. And again, like I think it's and I think we've been kind of clear about this too. It's like you can laugh at the preposterousness of the situations that this film presents, and not glorify it. I think that's hard. I think that's hard for maybe people that don't aren't ingrained maybe and watch a ton of films. I understand that too.
Films, especially,
and some people, again, like when the book came out, there wasn't the internet. There wasn't, nobody really knew what that was. So you really get kind of like word of mouth in a negative way, as both a positive and negative way when you were doing anything. And I think the book kind of got hit with that. But however, having said that, I feel like although the 80s was sort of like a decade of excess and greed and gluttony and all that stuff, the 90s was definitely the decade of controversy and sensationalism. And you saw that in movies, I think, that came out in the 90s. The best example probably being Natural Born Killers. But just the fact that the O.J. Simpson trial and the Bill Clinton scandal, and there was all this stuff that was kind of that was a thing that was a thing in the 90s. I mean, I was too young in the 80s to notice that. It didn't feel like it was looking back on stuff that I've looked at. It doesn't feel like it was the same.
It's like in the Jerry Springer era, right? Like everything was pumped up to the almost sideshow levels of absurdity and just shining this really bright light on the terrible parts of human nature. And oh my gosh, look at how awful we are as humans. Look how dirty and gross and terrible and shitty and awful we are. Isn't that fascinating? And I think the 90s kind of really picked that up in a big way, especially as everything was kind of booming online a little bit more and everything was growing and TV was getting a lot more sensationalized. Media was getting a lot more sensationalized, like you said, with Michael Jackson, or not Michael Jackson, O.J. Simpson's trial.
And Michael Jackson. I mean, Michael Jackson was in it was always everyone was always looking for the next big story, next big juicy
scoop.
the big the big scoop, the big story, the big and you know the crazier it was, the better, right?
For
So,
sure.
but I do feel like this movie maybe again, like if you watch this movie when it came out, I think you would take something like that from it. When I watched it, I think the first time I was probably too young to really put all that stuff together.
Mhm.
But yeah, again, I do feel it's like it's an important film. I think it's one that'll probably be studied for a long time. For the messages that it has and that are maybe misinterpreted from coming from the film. A couple key points is that Christian Bale was interviewed. I believe it was for GQ magazine at their YouTube thing for his most iconic roles, and he said when he was doing the research for it, he went down to Wall Street and talked to a bunch of Wall Street guys in New York, and they're like, oh yeah, Patrick Bateman, we love that guy. And he's like, oh yeah, okay. It's like ironically, like, right? And they're like, no, like we really like that guy. Like we love that guy. And he's like, oh, like, which is like really funny because like, again, someone who gets the role is going to be able to portray the role better.
Yeah.
And apparently that Mary Harron and Christian Bale went for dinner with Bret Easton Ellis.
Yeah.
And Christian Bale was in character as Patrick Bateman, and Bret Easton Ellis said it was very, very offsetting and off-putting because he'd never seen one of his characters, like he'd never seen one of the monsters he'd created being brought to life. Christian Bale, I mean, great actor since he was a little kid, holding it down and blown up on this movie when he was 25, 26, I think. I don't know his exact age at the time, but I think it's around 25, 26. Still going strong today. Academy Award winner now. So,
Yeah.
and also fucking Batman. so
Newsies.
On the next episode, we're going to be reviewing Newsies. Yeah. Yes, he made Newsies. Must have made Newsies before this, right?
Yeah, he was a wee one.
That up. We never looked that up. Maybe we should do that right now, just for the benefit of Christian Bale, right?
Because Newsies, how old was he in Newsies?
He'd be pretty young.
Newsies was 1992.
Okay, so that's man.
Wow.
Okay, so 1992, and then he made so Empire of the Sun. Yeah, Newsies was, I guess, he made a couple of TV movies, but he was in Empire of the Sun, then Newsies. And then Swing Kids. Sorry, you know what? I was thinking Swing Kids.
Swing Kids is a great one.
And then
Velvet Goldmine is wonderful as well.
Yeah, I think he was in a smaller roles before then, and then I did Velvet Goldmine. And then I guess his main starring role was that movie, and then this one, right? So also the bad guy, also the villain in Shaft, the remake of Shaft with Samuel L. Jackson. That's pretty funny too.
Also, Christian Bale played Thomas in Pocahontas, the animated feature.
I've never seen that movie.
Thomas. Well,
was he good?
You're not painting with all the colors of the wind, then. Let me tell you, friend.
Listen, all I'm gonna say is that like he was in Reign of Fire, and Reign of Fire still to this day is one of my favorite fucking movies. I love that film. I think it's absolutely amazing. And severely underrated film. Him and McConaughey are so good together. And I also remember funny story. I think it was in 2020 when everything was going down, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to watch Reign of Fire. I haven't seen Reign of Fire in a while, and I think the date that the dragons come out of London, I think it's something like November. I think it's something like, I can't remember the exact date. It's like March 29th. 2020. and I was like, or like November, June 30th. It was some weird date, and I was like, "Get ready, guys! Like everything's gonna dragons are gonna be popping out.
Get ready for dragons."
Yeah. So, but I do like watch Reign of Fire. I mean, we should do.
Yeah.
It was Reign of Fire was 2000. So you know what? It can't be part of 90s nights. 2000.
Well,
when was it? No, Kelly,
produced?
we've already. Yeah. When was it?
2002.
Filmed?
It was 2002.
We've already pushed the limit.
Far. That is too far.
American Psycho was our cutoff. So everyone out there, again, we did this because the book was written and released in 1991, and the film went through a whole scale of productions in the 90s, was shot in 1999, and was released and premiered in January at Sundance 2000. So that's as close as you can get to the last movie really made in 1999. So that's what we're going with, part of 90s Night. Kelly, over to you.
I was gonna say also Lionsgate would have made this movie happen in the 90s if they just stopped being little jerks and let Christian Bale take the role when Mary Harron first said, I want this guy to do the role. If they hadn't dragged their heels through the whole process, this would have been a 99 movie, baby.
That's right. So Lionsgate,
This is
even though
on you.
even though Kelly talked a little shit there, I'm still saying that this 4K release is absolutely magnificent.
It is glorious.
I did wish I wish that there was more special features on this. I wish
Mm.
there was more. I just wish there was more. I wish the cast would come back and talk about this film a bit more. Like
Mm.
I want to hear what like I want to hear what Willem Dafoe says and Jared Leto and Chloe Sevigny. Like I want to hear them come back and look at this film and what's their take
It's
on it.
like
I
a
mean, again, some of these
retrospective.
people are like, it's just another job, man. Like I'm still a
Mhm.
working actor. It's just another job for me. But
Yeah.
I'd love to hear the interviews now as to what they think about the role. I've only ever seen
The
Christian
lasting
Bale talk about it.
impact.
And
Yeah.
I saw a Mary Harron interview, I think about 10 years after the movie was released. Maybe not even that much, but I'd love to like see kind of a round table with those actors if you could all get them in the same room. I think it would just
4K
be
release?
well. They've already released it on maybe like a double dip. Like I don't know if
A
I'm buying
double?
something more than this. Also, shout out to my buddy
Uh,
Winton who sold me this. Yeah, great stuff. So again, I think let's wrap this up. We're almost at the 2-hour mark. Sorry guys, but if you're still listening, thank you so much. Again, it's 90s Night Takeover Tuesday bonus episode on YouTube. If you get this video popped up, if you share it, subscribe, we will try and do it with a live audience down the road. So please do that. And hopefully you've enjoyed our analysis of our slightly drunken analysis and our slightly fangirl analysis of American Psycho. But Kelly, what do you think the legacy of the film is going to be? I know we've touched on it a couple times over the last couple hours, but the legacy of American Psycho, like where do you think it stands in the annals of film history?
I think not only is it infinitely memeable, I think it also, as we mentioned, keeps coming back as poignant every decade. Every decade we get a little bit more sociopathic and we get a little bit more relevant with this movie. So I think that's kind of the lasting legacy. I think A, it's a phenomenally made film. B, it is a cult classic, absolutely. C, infinitely memeable and infinitely quotable. And D, it's one that just the hits keep on coming with this movie in terms of how it ages. Though the decor may not age as gracefully, the content of the film does. So, yes, that's.
And do you have a favorite Patrick Bateman meme?
I have one that like it's not so much a meme, but it's just like a little screenshot that I send to somebody sometimes. It's just like him screaming on the phone, "Don't sound so fucking sad." I have that as like a little. Or like there's one that's like him like dead face and just says, I'm walking on sunshine playing underneath because it's when he's listening to it. So I just have more screenshots than memes, but I love that as well. That's
I do like the one. Like and we looked that up. That is in the scene where he takes Paul Ellen out for dinner at the restaurant that's not very popular, so he doesn't want to be there. And he's like Jared Leto's character Paul Ellen is talking about like how he's talking about Patrick Bateman's fiance's and that she's got a great ass, and then like Patrick Bateman's response to like he's pretending to be somebody else, obviously, but and then he's just like yeah, like and then he just goes into ripping apart Patrick Bateman because he's a piece of shit and like or he's a loser and all this stuff. Very, very, very funny. And the fact that that's a meme now is it blows my mind. But also like Chef's kiss. Pretty funny that Christian Bale will be memed for all time now, which is great because he's a fantastic actor. And I'd love to see him talk with the cast about this film and see what they think about it now. My thoughts and legacy of the film is I mentioned before, I think that the different decades you watch this in, it's going to mean something else. I think it'll be interesting to watch this movie 10 years from now. I do feel it is like a really great reflection of like, again, creating a character that's this maniacal monster, but it's actually, he's probably more of a mirror than a monster. And he's mirroring sort of like the monstrosities of the world around him. I think it's very, very telling. I think it's very, it touches that nerve in our human nature. Like you mentioned, Kelly, like in the 90s where like, everything is horrible and we're not like perfect people. And we're kind of despicable and we're shitty and like, let's look at that. Let's sensationalize that. I do feel it plays that it doesn't play the sensationalism card in this movie. I think that's very, very clear. I think that's something that will kind of be, I think film students will study it. I think it falls in the same range as some other movies. Kind of like I've heard this comparison a lot when I was doing my research, but David Cronenberg's Videodrome and David Cronenberg's Crash kind of around, it falls somewhere in there. And I think that that's true. Just from a sense of like, of how, it's representative of the era that it's trying to kind of present. And I think that's kind of a really cool thing. I do want to end it on this note. Thanks to everyone for tuning in. Kelly, anything to add? Sorry, before we go.
Thank you for staying with us for 2 hours.
Yeah. Of course, I'm your host, Benner. I'm Yammerstram tonight. One of the lesser known associates at Pearson Pierce, and Kells McNell is obviously my co-host. She's actually in Murders and Executions mostly. But thanks for tuning in. Please like, subscribe, share this episode if you really like American Psycho. If you know someone who does, we'd love for them to check it out. If you have any comments or questions or interesting facts that we know that we didn't bring up on the podcast, please leave them in the comment section below, and we'll try and address them maybe on the next episode. Or maybe it's just shit we want to know, man. You want us to know. It'd be great to hear about everything. That's awesome as well. And also too, I totally forgot to say this one quote, which is actually, again, one of the ones that I picked up on that I didn't realize that was in the film. And I don't know why I've never noticed this, but it's when Bateman actually kills Paul Allen. I think it's because it's such a shocking scene, and it's like you're focused on so many things. But he fucking hits Paul Allen in the head with the axe. The blood sprays over his face, and he said, "Try getting a reservation at Dorsia now, you selfish bastard."
That was the other mug I made. I had that.
Was it
on
really?
Mug. Yeah.
Oh, amazing!
I had "Try getting a
Can I get
reservation at Dorsia now" on a mug.
Okay, can you get me one of those mugs, please? Like, Jesus Christ. Anyway, listen. My name's Benner. My co-host over here is Kells McNells, of course. We'll be back live on Takeover Tuesday with another edition of Hot Stove from Hell, our Terrifier edition. Make sure you check that out. It's coming on June 6th, 2023. And again, please try and get us to 500 subscribers so we can look back at this episode and be like, yay, we were so small in our humble beginnings. And
bushy-tailed.
bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and half in the bag, but hey, what can we do? That's what happens when you go to Dorsia and Espas. Here's the trailer again for American Psycho. If you haven't got the 4K release from Lionsgate, please go pick it up. And Kelly, like you said, you can stream it on Netflix, I believe. If you're not into physical media, hey, we don't care how you consume great films. Just make sure you consume it some way that's legal, because it pays back into the studio system, as well into a lot of people's pockets, and they're able to make other great movies, and it keeps really great movies like American Psycho alive. This is being our first edition, our inaugural, not inaugural, that's the wrong word. Initial edition. I don't know. I gotta go, man. I gotta get off the mic. It's too late from now. We've gone for 2 hours plus. We blown way past our time period. But yes, if you just whatever you do, please support awesome films like American Psycho. And again, hey, leave a comment down below, and we'll see you next time on 90s Night.
I think my mask of sanity is about to slip.
If you stay, something bad will happen.
Sabrina, why don't you dance a little? Christy, get down on your knees.
Can we go now?
We're not through yet. I like to dissect girls. Did you know I'm utterly insane? Do you have any witnesses or fingerprints?
Actually, yes.
Very nice.
I don't want to get bruised. You're inhuman.
I know my behavior can be erratic. I need to engage in homicidal behavior on a massive scale. Hey, Paul!
So what do you do?
I'm into murders and executions mostly. I had to kill a lot of people!